Welcome to this video. My name is September, and with me I have Mark from omnom.io. And in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to Omnom in kind of like a, interviewee type scenario. And this is going to be a new video type for me. So let me know what you guys think in the discussion below. And with that said, let's just get right into it. Mark, how you doing today?
Doing all right. How about you, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you, first of all, for taking the time and allowing yourself to be my first interviewee.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
We'll see how this goes. So first of all, can you tell me about yourself? Like, what do you do for a living? And if you're going to college, what are you studying?
Sure thing. So, my name is Mark, obviously. I'm a student. I don't do anything for a living right now because I'm a student. I attend the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I am a freshman there, and I am trying to study mathematics and data science. So those are my planned majors, although I don't know if I'll actually succeed in, studying them. Other than that, I'm originally Russian. I immigrated here with my family when I was young, so when I was around 5, we immigrated here. So I've lived in the United States for most of my life. That being said, I do speak Russian, and I regularly incorporate translating Russian into Omnom. But most of my life I have lived in around the New England area in the United States.
Wow, that's really interesting because I had no idea that you were native Russian. That's amazing. So that also speaks volumes on how you were able to at least get the translations from the Russian so easily.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us about omnom.io and what prompted you to actually make the website?
Sure. So around 2.9, I was talking to a friend. He is the guild leader of Barcode. Some of you may know him as Tadia. So around that time, I was basically just trying to help him out with planning for future patches, and as a result, I started translating bits of the 2.9 patch notes from Russia. Lo and behold, that turned over like several weeks. That project basically turned into a huge Google Doc, which consisted of 70 pages or so, which was going around in the Barcode Guild. So this was around when we had 2.5. Eventually I was like, well, it's not, I feel like it'd be just better to share this Google Doc with the community. So that's what I did, and I got a lot of, praise for doing that, because at that point in time, not a lot of people, or not really anybody, was translating patch notes, or rather, nobody was really translating them in a whole fashion. Like, you got bits by bit and you got them in sort of broken English. What I did was basically compile them into one place, and as a result I made them more legible, easier to access. After that, basically, for 2.9 and for 3.0, I used a Google Doc format, and come 3.5 I started working on my own site. At that time I was basically mentioning that to several guildies. I was in Barcode at that time, and Tadia, my guild leader, who I had started doing the patch notes for, he mentioned that he had a domain that he would let me use. That domain was omnom.io. So I basically set up a website on there and started doing my translations there as articles. So that's where it went off. That's where Omnom was born.
That's really interesting. I didn't know anything about the original Barcode relationship, but it actually now makes sense. So I don't know if you know, but I am from a server where Barcode originated.
Yep.
It used to be ayahuasca versus Barcode, and we were always fighting each other for the content on our servers. As I progressed to doing my own thing and moving to PTS, Tatia was one of the ones that helped me out with getting a lot of credits on the test server. Through his, guild and whatnot, he had access to a lot of people that just basically were not using their credits there. So that was really that's a really interesting tie-in. You know, I used to hate Barcode because just the natural guild versus
Yeah,
guild thing.
I can
But I tell
understand
you
that.
what, I've gotten to know a lot of those people. Tatia, one of them, as well as a couple of the other guys in Barcode that come to the karaoke.
Yeah.
And they're just they're not the evil monsters that we made them out to be. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you said that you used to be on Barcode. If not, you still are. But do you actually still play Archeage?
No, I quit Archeage about 3 days before the last cycle of merges happened. There were some events in game that I didn't agree with. I'll leave it at that. And with college starting up, with me basically not having time to play, I just saw that as the perfect time to leave the game. Um, I think the last time I logged in was for a day during October 2017, and I haven't really had an urge to play since then. I don't know. The game just actually playing the game lost its charm for me. I don't really. While I do sort of associate with Barcode, I don't really associate with any guild anymore. I'm kind of my own man, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but I don't know. I just the gameplay itself. It didn't really get old to me, but I guess I got tired of it. As a result, like I still enjoy doing Omnom immensely. I love doing translating patch notes for the community, but actually playing the game just got boring to me. And with the game kind of the population getting smaller and whatnot, I just didn't see like a point of me playing it.
Sure, I understand that. So let's go back to Omnom. So you said you basically started this around 2.9 or 2.7, was it, as a Google Doc, and then it
Yep.
just kind of turned into the website. So
Yep.
since then, what has really been the most? I'm sure you are aware of the ways to track the most popular
I am.
article and things like that. What has been like your most popular article or tool that you put out on the website?
Well, I generally put out articles. I did put out one tool, and that was basically the Aranor spreadsheet. And I would say that really is the most viewed thing that I have. In general, the 3.5 category was way more viewed than any other patch. That may be because the player base has declined since then, or because the patch was just more in depth than the other patches that have come since then. But that being said, the patch has been just way more viewed than 3.7 or 4.0 or even 4.5. So in terms of an article, I don't know. The articles on Aranor gear were very viewed because obviously everybody was trying to get prepared, trying to get their divine and epic Aranor as soon as possible. So having a few months in advance to prepare with the articles helped a lot of people, and as a result, a lot of people accessed the articles and whatnot. So those are basically my most viewed ones.
Yeah, I can imagine the Aranor spreadsheet, and you know that I've also done one of those.
Yep.
And it was kind of like it. We were almost made out in the community that we were butting heads on that, and that was never the case,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was never the case. You who actually did? I saw that there was a reference in the original spreadsheet to somebody else who actually did most of the work on the original Aranor spreadsheet.
It was taken from a Korean player, so it was directly taken from a Korean server on Invin. I contacted the guy. He had posted on there, and he said that I could use it and whatnot. The guy, I don't actually know his in-game name or whatever. I just know that he was on Invin, and that was about it, basically. In terms of a lot of the data that I compiled was basically just me scouting around on Invin and on the Archeage forums, but some of the calculations were taken from the Korean player himself.
So that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. And now I'm thinking about, with the 4.5 changes and what it's going to take to actually update one of those spreadsheets, and I'm not really liking the prospect. Because now you've got the RNG with the proc bonus XP.
Yeah.
And then also you have like trying to figure out the regrade rates and the cost rates of all this stuff when you've got different items coming out at different levels. And one thing I noticed is we still didn't get, at least in the 4.5 patch notes that you put out here recently, and I just put a video up today about that. The one thing I didn't see is any mention of the armor house giving any bonus output of crafted stuff.
Yeah, I have no idea about that. I mean, personally, like the 4.5 article that I put out so far, it has been basically an overview of articles that XL has put out. So I haven't actually seen any like specific patch notes yet. It's just been them giving sneak peek articles, I'd say.
I get what you're saying. So it's more like these aren't really patch notes; they're more of, hey, this is what's coming.
Yeah. So when the actual patch notes do come, I'll title an article "Patch Notes," like full patch notes, and I'll just directly word for word translate the patch notes. In terms of like, for example, you were talking about updating the spreadsheet, like the RNG bonus thing, for example, the RNG bonus experience on synthesis. I could never figure how that worked. Like it was a black hole for me because I tried for a while just searching around on Korea. How does it work? How does it work? No information whatsoever. So as a result, I kind of left that, to be.
Yeah, the one thing that I can actually do is because of the public test server, you can sit down and you could get, if you wanted to, and I may end up doing this myself, but you could get like 200 of the exact same, items to combine, and you can just make a bunch of alts to do this, and then try to figure out the ratios. But I'm with you. I mean, we want to hear this is, it's a 20% chance or it's a 10. We want that hard number.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's always just going to be speculation.
Yep, absolutely. It's something that bothers me with how the game is handled, with a lot of the chances kind of being locked behind a door, but whatever.
Yeah, and that's one of my big things is I talked about this, was that they really need to increase the transparency. And this is the kind of transparency that I'm talking about. It's not so much of, hey, what state is this bug fix in? I don't really care about that. I like to know that you're working on it. But I want, when there's something like RNG related, I want to know the truth behind the numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back. We just talked about the Aranor spreadsheet being probably your most popular or viewed thing that you've put out there on Omnom.
Yep.
But that's one thing for other people to really like it. But what are you most proud of that you've put out on Omnom?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question because I put out a lot of things and I've never really stopped to think about what has been my biggest achievement, I think my biggest achievement has just been working on Omnom in general, just been creating a website that has a lot of info from other regions, which we wouldn't have otherwise. And just giving that to community, that has been really a big achievement, as well as seeing how much Omnom has grown over the past year, basically. That has been another big achievement of mine. In terms of, I guess, scope, like in terms of how, like, large articles, I'd say that the skill translations for 4.5, I mean, that was a pain in the ass. Royal pain in the ass, because I had to literally write I had to basically teach myself, well, I knew how to write Korean more or less before that, but I had to teach myself to quickly type in Korean, and I had to look at the images one by one, type everything out, because the OCR just didn't work for it. And so as a result, I basically took images for, I don't know, what was it, like 20 per skill tree, so like 200 images, and just typed them out. And it was just a pain in the ass than making sense of what the translations were, cross-referencing it. As a result, it took like a month and a half to complete. So
that's amazing that you mentioned that, because I was just going to talk about that. In the video that I just put out today, I looked at the skill changes, and I was like, no, I can't even cover this in a video. I mean, that video that I put out was almost an hour long, and it was actually an hour long until I cut it down. And that it didn't have but maybe 5 minutes about skill changes. If you would have, if anybody were to go through those one by one, you're talking. I commend you. That was just a great achievement.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, the thing is about the skill changes, those weren't even final yet. So I gotta actually translate the final versions now of the skill changes, which released like yesterday, I think. And the way that Excel put them out in like tables, basically, it's gonna be a pain in the ass to translate as well, because not because it's hard to translate it, just because it's kind of cryptic in the way that they're doing it. So it's kind of annoying in that sense.
Yeah, I understand what you mean there. So, you said that like the skill changes took you, like a month and a half to do. So that kind of leads me to my next question, which was like, does anybody out there help you with omnom.io, or are you doing all this on your own?
I mean, in terms of direct content, not really. Like, I talk with a guy from Russia named Matt, and there were accusations going around from several people that I basically copy his content, which isn't true at all. Matt and I help each other, and Matt and I, like, every now and then we just contact each other on Skype, basically write a couple PMs to each other about, am I translating this correctly, or am I translating that correctly, or look at what I wrote for this. You can use it in your own content, But we don't really talk that much. We've talked quite a bit about 3.5, but other than that, we didn't talk too much. Also, recently I started a partnership with a guy named Paulinho from the Latin American community in Archeage. I think he plays in Tentacles Friends. Regardless, he will from now on basically be translating my articles into Portuguese for the Latin American community to view, which is a great help for me because it basically reaches a whole new part of the community, which is a large part.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really thankful to that guy for basically starting that, because he started on his own and he was doing it in a Facebook group, and I reached out to him and I was like, hey, we should just team up,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, but in terms of actually translating stuff, like, it's everything, all those articles that you see, those are all written by myself. I don't really it's all basically solo work from here on out, so that's why it takes a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I speak on behalf of everybody that has used your website. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
So speaking of that, Omnom is basically the site to get the latest or upcoming news from, and it's basically the site for the Archeage news. And with that in mind, I mean, have you thought about, I know you have like Discord and Facebook and probably Twitter fans out there, but have you actually thought about, turning this into something like the old Curse Gaming Network or the IGN, where you're a fan site, but then you're so good at what you do that you can start incorporating other games and recruiting other people to write articles, and at which point you could even turn yourself into make some money by advertising. Have you thought about anything like that?
Yeah, it's been at the back of, not even at the back of my mind, but even at the front of my mind for a while now, because I think it's pretty obvious at this point that Archeage is winding down in terms of its player base. So if I want Omnom to keep growing, I have to expand to other games. That being said, it's been hard, trying to find another game to expand to. I've had ideas. Sorry?
Let me interrupt you there. When you say it's been hard to find another game, is that because you can't find one that is lacking this type of content, or one that you actually like?
I'd say more that's lacking, but also because, let's say that I do find another game, right? That means that I have even more responsibilities, because Omnom does take quite a long time, and I do delay some stuff because I have, studies, I have things to do in real life. As a result, some articles get published later, some articles don't get published when I want them to be published. If I were to take on another game, which would be probably larger than Archeage, then that would just basically double, even triple my workload. And as a result, I don't know if I could even handle that, you know? So
Sure.
I have to, what I've been trying to find is basically finding a game where I have where I have the capability to actually continue to pump out articles and to continue to entertain a base of readers, rather than saying, no, I can't finish this article this week, no, I can't finish this article the next week either, because I just have so much work piled on right now, and it's just getting out of control, you know. In terms of what like my ideas were, for a while, I wanted to translate basically Inven for League of Legends and for Overwatch. For those of you who don't know what Inven is basically like the Korean Reddit. It's a big Korean megaforum, basically. And so people talk a lot about esports there and whatnot, and I wanted to basically translate articles from Inven for esports. But when I when I tried doing that, it just proved to be a lot of work, a lot more work than I could do by myself. So I sort of let that rest for a while. So that's that.
Okay. Well, that puts something out there. If there's anybody else out there that likes what you do and thinks that they can contribute, possibly they could offer you some support in that regards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open for working with other people. So if you guys know Korean, hit me up.
That's great. So besides Archeage, what games have you played in the past? And just kind of give us a like, this is the most fun game I've ever played. So like, this is just crap.
Yeah, I mean, I've played a lot of games. I played and still do play League of Legends a lot. Got permabanned once on there, fun stuff. I used to play Overwatch quite a bit. StarCraft 2, I played when I was younger, was pretty good at that. PUBG, play that game a lot, love it. PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, Battle Right. A game called Master X Master, I used to play. Played some Black Desert Online and some Star Wars The Old Republic, and I'm currently actually kind of reliving the nostalgia playing Star Wars The Old Republic again on break. And I also used to play a lot of Age of Empires 2. So that's kind of the multiplayer games that I played. Didn't play a lot of single-player games, although I did play through Witcher 3, and that game was fucking phenomenal. So if you haven't played it, I'd really suggest that you take some time out and play that game, because it is just worth every single moment.
Wow, thank you. So you do have a vast experience in looks like a different an assortment of genres. It wasn't one in particular
Yep.
that I could pick out there. So what do you feel? Give me your general feelings about this crazy dynamic between XL Games and Trion as the developer and publisher of. Well, XL is both a developer and a publisher in Korea, but they are just the developer to us here in North America and Europe. So how, for me, this is the first time I've ever seen a game that has this weird dynamic of these two companies that are kind of both developers and publishers, because XL is and so is Trion, but not in this case. This is a very weird dynamic. What do you think about this?
Well, the dynamic, in my opinion, is just horrible. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that Trion and Excel have gotten themselves to a point where they have such a toxic relationship, where Trion is basically going on live streams and saying how it's not their fault and how it's all Excel's fault. So that's kind of ridiculous. I've spoken on the subject quite often, and I've talked about how the contract with Trion doesn't really give any leeway to Trion. The way that Trion's contract works with Excel, they can't really roll out most changes by themselves, and as a result, they have to wait until Excel decides to fix an issue, or Excel decides to maybe get back to them on an idea they have. And most of the time, XL won't even get back to them on that idea. You know, I've talked with Muzzy privately about it, and he's mentioned how a lot of the time XL will go like, no, we don't really think that this is the time to implement this, or no, we don't really like this idea, so we'll just basically ignore it. And while this isn't true for all aspects of the game, like Trion seems to have control of the cash shop, for example, a lot of what Trion does directly depends on XL's decisions. And as a result, it creates an extremely toxic environment between the publisher and between the developer, especially with a developer who is, as in my opinion, lazy as XL Games, because XL Games has again and again proven that they are extremely lazy and that is their main fault. That they really just A, can't keep a schedule on their updates, and B, are unreliant in what they say. That being said, Trion does have plenty of faults in their own, so I wouldn't say that blaming XL for all of Trion's faults is right, because both are very faulty as companies, and I don't really censor myself, and I don't really censor my community from saying that. So I'll just be outright in saying that both are horrible companies. Like
Okay.
there might be. I respect certain employees at Toronto. You know, I think that some people do a good job at what they do, at what they're assigned to. That being said, the way that Trion acts as a company, not as you know individuals on an employee level, is unacceptable, and the way that Excel acts as a company is also unacceptable.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page there. I've seen a lot of people, and even some of the other Trion creators I speak with, they're quick to blame Trion. Um, and yes, Trion does have its faults, absolutely, but you can't blame everything on Trion. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Both companies have severe issues that just makes this relationship pretty toxic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the analogy that I would use in this relationship is when a couple that hates each other, basically a couple that wants to get divorced, stays for the child. The child in this case is Archeage, and the couple here is XL Games and Trion. They have to stay together because they have to raise Archeage, basically. Otherwise, Archeage wouldn't be anything without them. You know, Archeage would literally just die off. But that being said, they seem to argue constantly. They seem to not actually like working with each other. They have problems with each other. So it's that kind of extremely toxic relationship that somehow needs to be fixed, but no steps seem to be taken to fix it, and it just keeps on getting worse and worse, it seems.
So if you're a couple counselor out there, please talk to Tryon and XL. Sit them down in a room together, and make them work
Yes,
this shit
please.
out.
Yeah.
So back to Archeage. What is, you mentioned that you were in Barcode, which I know that means that at least at one point you enjoyed PvP. What was the most interesting or fun thing that you have personally experienced in Archeage?
The PvP by far. The PvP was by far my favorite part of the game. I basically didn't pay any attention to other parts of the game. Like, I stopped working on my gear after the first merges happened. And since then, I mean, basically for the majority of the time that I was playing in the last year and a half, I was using other people's accounts. You know, I'll be frank about it. Other people's accounts who were like 7-8K gear score. So I wasn't really using my own account at all. But I love the PvP, and that was really that in the community, which I also love. Even though the community can be at times extremely toxic, I love both of those things, and those were really the things that kept me playing Archeage for the time that I did. You know, without that, I probably would have quit several months into the game. But with the PvP and with the community, I stayed for what was, I think, basically 3 years.
Wow, that's interesting. So here's kind of an oddball question. If you had enough money, and you can define this however you want, but if you had enough money to buy the rights to Archeage, and XL, of course, was willing to sell you those rights. Would you? And if not, why not?
That's a tough question. If I had enough money, well, I think that XL seriously overestimates how much their game is worth, personally. I mean, I don't. The game has a really bad reputation now, even more so than it had probably a year and a half ago, for being horribly mishandled, for being pay to win, and as a result, dragging it out of the hole that it's in right now is a Herculean task. That being said, let's say that I did buy it, although I'm not even sure that if I had the money and the opportunity to, I would. I would. I don't know. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. For example, the cash shop needs to be fixed. The way that the revenue, like the way that basically the company makes money off Archeage, in my opinion, needs to be changed. I'd certainly pave way for more content updates, because it's a little ridiculous when you haven't gotten a content update in over a year. So XL really needs to set their game up on that. In terms of other stuff, I mean, one of the big problems that I see with Archeage, and that I see with it basically failing to retain any new players, is that the gear gap is just impossible for new players or newer players to cross. There's a threshold of gear that players that have played the game for 3 years are at, and there's no real way for new players to catch up to. So in a lot of MMOs that you see, like, I don't know, like WoW or Black Desert Online or Star Wars: The Old Republic, right? They have systems in place that basically prevent the gear gap from being too much for new players. You know, for example, in Black Desert Online, when I returned after a hiatus of a year and a half, and I basically had only played the game for on launch for a couple weeks, and I wasn't even that geared. Like, I had only, the max tier that I had reached was, I think, like tier 6 or something, you know. So I was basically getting rewards every day for logging in, and those rewards were substantial. You know, they weren't 5 pots or something like that, or 5 merit badges, something ridiculous that doesn't really give anything to me in the long run. They were lots of gold that would allow me to buy gear, that would allow me to eventually, you know, in a month or so, basically be on not the same level playing field as players who have been playing the game for a year, but on a playing field that was comparable. In a raid, I could actually stand a chance. In Archeage, if I were to come back after a 1-year hiatus and go into a raid, I would get one-shot by every single Dark Runner or every single Mage, because that's just how the gear gap works. And it would take probably 3 months of hardcore grinding for me to catch up, or just a bunch of swiping.
Right.
That is a major problem, and that is a major reason why more and more players every day quit the game, and why we're really not seeing any new players join the game, because the gear gap.
Let me address that. And this wasn't really a question that I had wrote down for you, but since you kind of brought it up, the gear gap is really a major thing. But there is something to be said, and I think maybe that XL and Trion is a little too guarded in this, where they're looking at it like, okay, we know that guy with that Aranor has, you know, probably swiped, you know, a couple $1,000 or whatever to get that. And then if all of a sudden we you know, give out a free Ionad or something like that, how is that guy that swiped that $2,000, you know, for that one weapon gonna feel? You know, so there's that fine line that they got to walk. But you're absolutely right about this gear gap. So I'm going to sneak this question in here. You just did the 4.5 patch notes, and there looked to me like several attempts at trying to address that. How do you feel like they did?
I don't think they did enough. I think that there's still way more to be done, because the problem is it still doesn't take a month to catch up to a decent level. It still will take hardcore grinding, to catch up to a decent level of gear. It still makes the game feel like a job for a new player. Like, let's take the example of Muzzy, our community manager. He basically doesn't play the game anymore because he doesn't have time to actually play it to the level where he wants to play it. Because, as he said in his own words, the game is a second job. That's not really what most people are in the game for, or want to be in the game for. Maybe now that the player base, is so small, a lot of the competitive players are at a level where they can, or a lot of players can, basically they do grind a lot. But most players that play MMOs don't really want to have a second job. They want a game where to come home to, where they can, I don't know, relax, have a fun time, instead of worrying about how much gold you're making per labor, or how much you're going to make from this trade pack, or how much you're going to make in the next hour, or when are you going to buy your next piece of gear, It's these things that make the game, how should I say it? They make the game a pain in the ass to play.
Right.
There's a reason why I shared accounts for a year and a half, because I didn't have the time to grind my ass off. I had high school. I was a high school kid. I went to a high school that demanded a lot. As a reason, I would come home and I would play on the weekends, and I didn't have time to grind to a 7K gear score. Neither did I have the money to do that. As a result, I just, people basically offered their accounts to me, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll play on a 7K DR, I'll play on a 7K Archer with pleasure. That means that I don't have to grind. But most players don't have that privilege of having people come up to you and basically saying, like, I'm not playing anymore, do you want to use my account? Right?
Right.
That's a very special situation. So, going back to your question, the 4.5 thing, since I obviously sidetracked a lot, what they're implementing is that INAD, basically crafted gear, doesn't work anymore if you YOLO it, and crafting is a little bit easier, little bit. That being said, though, you still have to grind up the gold to get the gear. You still have to grind up the gold to get to INAD. You still have to grind up the gold to regrade that INAD. There's just so many boundaries that stop a casual player from actually playing the game and from getting to a decent level where he can PvP. And PvP is a massive part of Archeage. But as a result of the gear gap, you're cutting off any new players from the PvP, and you're basically cutting off any new players from half the game, I'd say, or maybe even more than half the game. So that's my take on it.
Okay, cool. So you've actually hit on some of the big topics that I think the community has been saying since like October, which we've already talked about the lack of content a little bit here. And then you kind of hit on this a little bit earlier before we got into this whole gear gap thing, was the pay to win aspect of the relationship between Trion and XL. And if you were to buy it, you'd have to get rid of the pay to win kind of crap.
Go ahead. 1 second. Just to reiterate, I wouldn't actually get rid of the pay to win. I'd get rid of how the cash shop works. The cash shop should be, in my opinion, cosmetic purely. That being said, while I would change the pay to win, I wouldn't fully get rid of it, because I do believe that actually pay to progress. I don't think that paying to win necessarily in an MMO is toxic. The way that Trion or XL handle it, though, the fact that basically I can pay to win to an infinite level, that is a bad part of it. So I would change that up a little bit, but I wouldn't fully get rid of swiping.
Okay, so let's define this. How do you define pay to win?
There's a lot of ways. I'd say that the basic form of paying to win is buying gold or buying Apex. Although most high level gear, high geared players don't really buy Apex anymore, or they do as a safeguard to not get banned for buying gold. So buying gold in a massive amount, like buying 100K or 200K gold at a single, in a single round, basically, that's paying to win. It is obvious that 19 out of the 20 players in the top 20 most geared players in Archeage have swiped, and they've swiped a substantial amount. And what they are doing is paying to win, because at that point in time, their gear allows them to be on a completely different level than almost any other player in the game. Can a player who has, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 gear score beat them? Yes, every now and then, but it still allows them to dominate the game's content. If these players unite, they basically monopolize the server. They take all the content for themselves. So as a result, they are literally paying to win. That being said, in most MMOs, paying to win is an issue, but it's just an inbred issue in how MMOs are structured, in the sense that items are bought. Gear is mostly bought with gold, or gear can be bought with gold. But in Archeage, it's an extreme, because the best gear is absolutely bought with gold, and the best gear you need gold for, unlike in other MMOs.
Okay, so kind of in the same vein, North America, EU, we've actually had this weird cycle of, at least once a year. Well, for the past 2 years, we have what they call fresh start servers. What do you? I mean, like, didn't they learn the first time? And I don't want to put words in your mouth. And if you differ in opinion, please say so. But didn't they learn the first time that when they created, what was it, Morpheus? And yes, it attracted a lot of people, and they got caught in the same thing, the gear gap, the pay to win aspect. And then all of a sudden you have a server that has to be, it's a shell, it's a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to roll it, you have to migrate it somehow into the existing servers, which is actually an inconvenience for the existing servers. So what is your opinion? I mean, there is good things about the fresh start servers. I mean, it's nice to see new people. It's nice to get new people playing. It's nice to see that level of excitement again.
Yep.
But on the other hand, is it really worth it? What's your opinion?
I think it's bad. I think that the way that they implement it each time, and the way that they keep on pushing it, is bad. So when I still played, I would regularly speak against the making and the implementation of more fresh start servers, as these fresh start servers, they just killed off legacy servers each time more and more, which I was a part of. I never participated in the fresh start servers. I never had any interest in them. So the fresh start servers, in my opinion, they provide a quick boost in revenue and player numbers for Trion. But long term, it's toxic, because, as we said earlier, as you and I said, Archeage fails to retain players in the long term. It's an inbred fact in how the game is structured. And because of the gear gap, it just fails to retain most players in the long term. On fresh start servers, usually a guild will come out on top. They will be way more geared than other players. They will usually have swipers. They'll monopolize the server, and most players that are playing fresh start, they're only playing fresh starts for the nostalgia. They'll lose that nostalgia in, I don't know, a month or two. As a result, by 2 months in, the fresh start servers, they're not dead, but they're not much more populated than the legacy servers. So all they've done in the end is just kill off legacy servers even more, and created another server with a disparity for players, which contributes to the growing issue of Archeage's overall disparity for players, and Archeage's overall issue of players being spread across servers, as a result making servers boring.
Well, that's well put. So on the same subject, what we just outlined, you and I both here, with the problems with fresh start servers, I was like shocked when I read your article that XL is now trying to do what they're calling. They're not calling it a fresh start server. They're calling it a classic server.
Yep.
What do you think that's about?
It's a push for. It's obviously a push for money. It's a push to get some much needed revenue that they need. That being said, it's a step in the right direction. But it's a step in the right direction 2 years too late. This is what Morpheus should have been in the first place. This is what they should have done a while ago. Now, I mean, Archeage is in such a state that players don't want to play it anymore. Even if you advertise it a ton, you're still not going to get a lot of players to play it because of how notorious the game is. Because of how notorious the game is for being horribly mishandled. The thing is, fresh start servers, what they really appeal to is those players who play the game on launch and then they quit. And they want to relive those games, those days of launch days. And this is what this classic fresh start server is appealing to. It's appealing to those players who want to relive the nostalgia. And what XL seems to want to do is they want to retain those players a little bit more. They want to give them that nostalgia for longer. Because on a fresh start server, as we saw before, that nostalgia lasted for a couple weeks until players got really geared. Here it'll maybe last a couple months. But will it be enough to retain players is the real question here. I don't think it will be. I think that in the end that the gear gap will come out on top and that XL will do the same shit, you know?
Okay.
But I do believe that it is finally a step in the right direction with how fresh start servers are done. That being said, there have been just so many there have been 2 cycles of fresh start servers in the past, so
No.
Perhaps it's too soon to do it. I don't know.
This is another question that I didn't have written down, but you do know a little bit more about the Korean community, and can you tell the people listening that what the status of Archeage is like in North Korea?
Well, in North Korea, Kim Jong-un controls the entire servers, and his army goes around killing the plebs. But no.
Can you tell the people listening what the status of Archeage is like over in Korea compared to what it is like here?
I'd say. Sorry.
No, are they the same, or is there just this crazy big community? What's going on in Korea?
No, I'd say that it's even more dead than over here. I'd say that I don't know. The Korean servers for a while they were more alive maybe than the Archeage North American and EU servers, but right now they really seem to have just died. And I think that's part of the reason why XL went back on their promise, which they made, or I think it was in July, where they said we're not going to do any more fresh start servers. But instead they did do fresh start servers. They announced it in a couple months later in November that we're doing another fresh start server. And the reason for that is because the community in Korea is small. It's tiny, and it's getting smaller and smaller day by day. And XL really needs to step up their game to get a community the size they want again. In terms of the differences between NA and /EU in Korea, a lot of the things are the same. Like we get the patches that we get are usually they're not carbon copies of the patches that Korea gets, because there are some differences, like the fact that a lot of Korean players play computer games from PC bongs or PC cafes, basically, and they get bonuses for playing in PC cafes. Also, alts aren't an issue in Korea because you need a social security number to play a game in Korea. So as a result, everybody usually just has one account instead of having 2 bajillion accounts and an army of alts. But also, Cash Shop is different in the sense that you can buy items straight up. There are no RNG boxes really, or there weren't until lately. But in terms of the differences between NA and EU and Korea, there's not too many on the surface, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so recently you just put out, and we talked about this before, the 4.5 preview article. And of all those changes in there, what were you the most excited to see?
I think the skill changes are the part where I'm most excited about. Because,
Spoken like a real PvPer.
Yeah. The patch doesn't actually provide much content. I mean, it provides the pet things and the changes to the boss, but it doesn't really provide new content, right? Which is a problem that we underlined before, and a problem that I will continue to underline. That XL needs to, push out more content. It's what we really want as a community. But the skill changes will change the way that the game is played, the way that PvP raids happen, the way the meta will be almost certainly changed. I think that even more so, like for example, Burst Dark Runners, I think that they're going to become an even bigger staple of the meta rather than having Dark Runners in Obsidian. That's just an example. So I think that Dark Runners running in like something like 7 out of 7 Flame or just having full-on strength, that's going to be a big thing in 4.5. But 4.5 in general is a lot of quality of life changes, which I mean, it's good that they're doing it, but they're doing it too late. I said it once again, and I'll say it again, that XL is pushing out way too many changes that they should have been pushing out a year ago or 2 years ago. Right now, they should be focusing on actually retaining their player base. Yeah, which needs new content.
So here's another sneak. I'm going to sneak this question in here. So you're talking about the fact that they're doing some quality of life changes, and it seemed like this is in the video that I just did. It seems like it just feels like that XL all of a sudden, like uncharacteristically, decided to start listening to the community. Now, we as the North America Europe community have actually, for the past probably 4 or 5 months, been screaming about certain things like gear gap, content, pay to win. We've actually done that, and it looks like in 4.5 they're actually starting to address some of those issues, not completely, but some of them.
Yep.
And when you look back, when we started screaming, 4.0 was already out in Korea, right? Mm-hmm. So there was really nothing that could have been done in 4.0 directly, because that was basically already in the pipe. Mm-hmm. So this seems like it's the 4.5 seems like it's the earliest that they can actually do something about it. So do you feel like, I guess I already know the answer to this, but do you feel like they're doing enough, or do you think maybe in 5.0 or 4.7, whatever's next, that we'll actually see more of the same, where they're actually trying to listen to the community?
How should I say it? So back in their preview and basically their statement for 2017, they said that in 2017 we'll be focusing on a lot of quality of life changes. Okay, they did focus on a lot of quality of life changes, but 4.5 isn't. 4.5 is releasing in 2018. As a result, I think that it would have been the perfect opportunity for them to release new content, but they didn't. They kept to the quality of life changes. That being said, I do think that down the line, in the next big patch, we will be receiving new content, because there were rumors stemming from XL that they are working on some new big boss. Some new boss that will be harder than Leviathan or something like that. That being said, last time that they said that a boss was harder than Leviathan from Thundering Titan, me and my guild leader and I, we sat down, we watched a couple of VODs, and we killed Thundering Titan. Not Thundering Titan, Leviathan. We sat down and we basically killed Thundering Titan the day after it released. So that wasn't harder than Leviathan.
And is like, let me stop you there. Is a raid boss, is a new Leviathan or whatever, is that actually content? Because really it is content for
the top of the game.
Yeah, 5% of the population. Yeah. So is that really content? I mean, yes, it is content, but it's not content that's accessible to everyone.
I can certainly understand what you're saying, but it is content nonetheless, because if you look at the people who are doing it, they're the people who are probably investing, I don't know if the most time into the game out of most players, but they are probably the most committed players out of the majority of the player base. As a result, you really do need to appease them to a certain extent.
That's fair.
That being said, the game does need more content on a level where it's accessible to everybody. I don't know what that content is. All right. The Naval Arena was supposed to be new content. Well, the Naval Arena is shit. I'm sorry, XL. They implemented it incorrectly in my opinion. Cross server arenas were supposed to be new content. Okay, we already had arenas. It's kind of a band-aid fix. So I don't know what new content should be for XL, because let's say that they do make new content. Let's say that they make a dungeon or something like that. Does that counteract with the fact that Archeage is by nature a sandbox game? Do they want to make Archeage even more of a theme park game, as they've been trying to make, it seems like, in the past 2 years? Do they want to continue on the path of making Archeage a more theme park based game, like something like WoW or Rift? Or do they want to go back to their roots? Do they want to make it even more do they want to basically make it more sandboxy? I don't know the answer to this. I'm not the developer. And I truly don't know what content the majority of the player base wants. I know what content the 5% wants, because that's basically the players that I associated with since 2.5 years ago. Basically, I know that we want that 5% or that 10% wants something new to PvP over. We want something new to contest. We want something fun to contest. But I have no idea what people who like to farm or who like to run packs, who have a different play style than I do, want out of the game.
You can call us potatoes. We don't mind. All right, so moving on. Trion really actually has given you a lot of props, like in the live streams lately, for your work on omnom.io. So I have a question. First of all, are you a Trion creator? Yes or no?
Yeah, I am. The way that I became a Trion creator was a little weird, because I don't actually remember asking to be one, but I got the emails nonetheless, and I was like, okay, whatever.
Right.
I'll be a Trion creator. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear. So outside of the Trion creator program, have you ever had any direct contact with either Trion or XL Games? Any correspondence, any contact about anything that you have done on omnom.io, or something that you would like to do?
Yeah, Trion, absolutely. I've had a fair bit of communication with their community managers like Muzzy and Celstrata. I've had basically one-on-one talks with Muzzy, privately, and there were plans to do something with that, but they never came to fruition. XL Games, no, I've never talked with XL Games. XL Games really seems like an alien entity to NA and EU players with how they sort of act. And I've never really been presented the opportunity to talk to them, and I don't think anybody from outside of Korea has really. Like anybody, I haven't heard of anybody from Russia talking to them, or from China. And I don't know if I even would want to talk to them.
Well,
I don't know.
You couldn't hold back, or what?
No, it's not that. It's just I don't. With how they act, I don't see the point of talking to them, because they seem to really be, they seem to be adamant on continuing their behavior and continuing down the path that they chose. I don't think that anything that I say or anything that Trion says will change that. Change that path that they've chosen. So I feel like it'd be just a waste of time if I were to attempt to talk to them personally.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
Did you have it? I'm just going to wrap it up here, but I did have one last question, and it was, would you like to say anything specific to the people that view your website or follow you on Discord, Twitter, or your Facebook page. Anything you want to say to your fans?
I just want to say to everybody who's been reading Omnom, who's been talking to me over the past year about the future patches, thank you. Just thank you so much. It's been a hell of a year for Omnom and for myself. And I really just, with the new year coming up, I can't wait to see what 2018 holds. Thank you to everybody who has stayed with me on this journey that I undertook, regardless of any hiatuses that I took or happenings that in real life that caused me to take breaks from Omnom. It's been my absolute greatest pleasure to help all of you, to serve with the community, and to just to create a project such as this, and to serve the Archeage community in such a way. And none of this could be possible without the continued support that I receive from the community. Regardless if it's just a thank you or if it's a Mark, I think you have a mistake here, or I was looking at this. I have some questions about that. I love questions, and I love it when I love talking to people, which is why I just love being in my Discord and answering people's questions and doing live streams to answer people's questions, and why I love doing Omnum in general. So if anybody ever has any questions about the future of the game, really feel free to reach out to me on Discord. Mark #4102 is my tag. You can find me on the Omnum Discord. But once again, thank you so much, guys, for sticking through with me and for continuing to support Omnum. And I will continue to serve you guys as best I can.
Well, thank you, Mark. And on that note, this is September. Thank you very much. I'm going to put not only my links to my Discord, my Twitter, my Patreon, but as well as Mark's in this video description.
Thank you.
If you would like to support him, please do so. Even like I said in my last video, just going in there and saying thanks as a creator, I know that means a lot every time I hear it. And as Mark just said, it means a lot to him. So until next time, this is September saying, be well.